Hi everyone, it's great to see you all again. I hope you all had a terrific week. My name is Jim Hewitt. I'm the professor of education at the University of Toronto. I do research in educational technology, and I'm one of your co-presenters. And the other co-presenter is Nidhi Sachdeva. She's also a professor at the University of Toronto, and the two of us do a lot of co-teaching together and research together, mostly in the area of the science of learning. I hope you've all had a great week. Got a chance maybe to go out and see the eclipse on Monday. I had a nice time. I went down to the Grand River to see it with my family, and I hope some of you managed to get out too. It was quite an event. We had a bit of cloud cover, but it wasn't too bad. Anyways, we're both very happy to be here again, and we've got some more exciting stuff for you. Nidhi?
All right. Good morning, everyone. As Jim mentioned, we both teach education courses at OISE, and this book study has been really exciting for us. So welcome. If you're new, welcome, and if you're coming back for round 5, welcome back. It's awesome to have you back here. So as you all know, this is a book study that we've been working on, How Learning Happens, Seminal Works in Educational Psychology and What They Mean in Practice, written by Paul A. Kirschner and Carl Hendrick, and a really great resource. And good news is that there is another edition that has come out, the new edition, second edition. And Paul was here last session, was giving us some updates on what are some of the new things in there too. So I think I'm about to get my hands on one of the copies, so I'm super excited about that. And hopefully I have a chance to get it signed by Carl, because he's coming to Toronto on May 3rd and 4th. So yay. All right. Okay, so let's get back to the book study and not the conference so far. So far you can see we've covered a number of important topics. We began with the information processing model and cognitive load theory. Then we explored the role of prior knowledge and depth of processing. And then in week 4, we looked at spacing, retrieval practice, and interleaving, if you remember that. And in today's session, we're going to examine something that's really foundational for especially developing multimedia content. It's called dual coding theory. And again, it's really focused on how to present new content to learners, your students, or any range from K to 12 to higher education, and even in learning and development, I would say. So our agenda today is we've already done the welcome back, but we will do a real quick review of our last session, and we're gonna do it in the form of brain dump this time. And then we're gonna get into our session 5, which is dual coding theory. We'll also touch upon multimedia principles that have really been the product. I would say Richard Mayer has done a tremendous job just coming up with these very tangible, very practical multimedia principles that we can use directly and create content that makes sense to the human cognitive architecture. We're also going to talk about learning styles. When you talk about dual coding theory, we got to talk about learning styles and bust the myths there. And we're going to briefly just mention what our next session is, which is also our last session. So pretty excited. Okay, but before we get into dual coding theory, let's do a real quick recall from our last session. And we're going to do it in the form of brain dump. I'll tell you what I would like you all to do. So if you remember, we talked about primarily 3 terms last time, which is retrieval practice, interleaving, and spacing. What I'd like you to do, what Jim and I would like you to do, is take a moment in the chat and don't press enter when you've written it. Just take a moment, maybe take a minute and a half or so, write the definitions of all the 3 terms, retrieval practice, interleaving, and spacing in your chat, and keep it in your chat. I will say the word waterfall. Maybe I'll start the timer or something. I'll just watch it on the Zoom clock here. And when I say waterfall, then everybody press enter, so we don't get influenced by each other's answers. We'll still have a chance to reply what we remember. So let's start now. So the time starts now. Take a minute and a half and write the definitions of the 3 terms in your chat. Don't press enter yet. So much pressure.
Waterfalls are fun. I do sometimes make a mistake of, like, I go to a new line and I press enter instead.
I know it's an accident or it's an urge, but just type the 3 definitions from what you remember without having it in front of you. Okay, I'm just going to say waterfall in a second, and waterfall. So folks can press enter and watch the magic. Watch the magic happen. So let's read again. We can all read it on our own time for a second. I'll just be looking at it. That's okay, Anna Marie. It's exactly what Jim was saying. No problem. And you know what? You pressed enter very close to when I was about to say waterfall. So all good. Okay, so recall is enhanced when learning is distributed. Yes. Matthias is saying retrieval practice, get the information out of your head instead of just trying to enter it. Yeah, taking it out. It's such a powerful idea. Testing helps students better remember material rather than just studying alone. Longer sessions, learning are counterproductive. Oh, and I love Paul started with interleaving. Thank you, Paul. Mixing up related but different topics. Yes, yes, the fruit salad and no broccoli in it. Retrieval practice is about recalling content. Thank you, Jim. You participated a lot like that. Well done, Jim. Bringing things to mind from memory, allowing an interval of time to pass. Jennifer saying, awesome. Interleaving, mixing up problems or activities. Activities, that's right too. Force learners to recognize the differences. Yeah, keeping them on your toes, basically, right? Interleaving is varying difference. Practice helps better accuracy. Yeah, they all to add to that notion that Paul mentioned last time, desirable difficulties. It was really fascinating. Spacing is teaching many lessons over time, so students recall. Retrieval is when students have a chance to recall, and mixing concepts to improve memory. Yes, great. Well done. Good job. Amazing. So your brain dump was very successful and the definitions are all very aligned. Amazing. Thank you. Perfect.
Yeah,
So, yeah, go ahead, Jim.
yeah, no, I was just going to say that one of the things I remember looking at this past week was some research that was looking at, again, retrieval practice and all the different groups that benefit from it, people with learning difficulties, people, dyslexia, certainly, people at kind of the low end, kindergarten, all the way up through adults. It was kind of cool. It seems you don't usually get one thing that helps so many different groups.
That's right. I think it was Anna Marie who brought up that question, and then we ended up digging a little bit up and then found, perhaps to no surprise, I would say, but we had never really looked at that literature, is that there's so much support, so much evidence out there in that context. And of course, for learners with any kind of learning disabilities, it's still a very, very powerful tool and can help improve memory. So yes, to your point, doesn't happen all that often in educational research, at least, that we can all say, yes, this thing really does work. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. And I think one of our participants, I'm not sure if Anustrup is here, but he had tagged me on an amazing new article with regards to retrieval practice and kinds of retrieval practice. I believe it was just last night that I got tagged. I haven't read it, but if more updates on that, I'll probably take a look and then share some synthesis of it with you folks. Okay, so moving on, thank you again for participating in the brain dump. Let's now talk about dual coding theory. So dual coding theory is a really exciting theory that informs how to design and deliver multimedia presentations in effective ways, keyword effective, because we could just do it, but how do we make sure that we're doing it right? And that's where dual coding theory can help us. So to introduce it, let's take a look at our information processing model briefly. So you remember we began our course by looking at the working memory, which is extremely limited in size and duration, and we know this. We looked at cognitive load theory at this point. We found that learning can be optimized if we can teach in ways that don't overload working memory. This means teaching things in smaller chunks and giving students an opportunity to encode them in long-term memory. Then we turned our attention to long-term memory. We looked at how we establish new deep connections in long-term memory by linking the new knowledge to existing knowledge structures. That's how we make it stick. There are a variety of ways of doing that. We also looked at the importance of prior knowledge. If students don't have the right prior knowledge, they can't actually create the appropriate links to new knowledge. Then last week, we looked at different practices like retrieval practice, spacing, interleaving that strengthen the connections in our long-term memory. And we looked at formative assessment methods in which teacher supports the construction of new knowledge by providing them timely feedback to students. The next step is to actually move our attention to the top, sensory memory. We're going to talk about a subject that we first encountered during our study cognitive load theory, which is the multimedia effect or dual coding. It's basically this notion that we receive both visual and verbal information through our senses.
Okay, so dual coding is really fascinating because, as Nidhi says, it recognizes that our sensory and cognitive architectures, they're kind of specially designed, and they have this ability to process two types of information simultaneously and in parallel. So both visual information and textual information. So that's the main idea. It's actually pretty simple. We can look at things and we can listen to text and we can process them at the same time. So in this model, which you might have seen in your text, I think, the idea is that we acquire new knowledge primarily through these two channels, which they call logogens and imagegens. So imagegens refers to nonverbal stimuli, like that could be images or graphics or animations. That's on the right-hand side. And logogens refers to verbal stimuli. So that could be talk or it could be text. So it's not quite as straightforward as just eyes and ears. That's one way to think about it, but that doesn't quite capture it because um, text, which is you look at visually, text is considered logogens. It's our brains trying to process language. So we've got logogens again on the left and imagegens on the right. If you look on the far left and far right, you can see some examples I provided, like listening to a speech or reading text is logogens, looking at images and watching a video is imagegens. So the importance here is that we don't get cognitively overloaded when we get images and text at the exact same time. Actually, our systems are designed to process those two things at the same time. And if we receive information about the same thing in two different modalities simultaneously, it actually has an additive effect on learning. And that's really cool. What it means essentially is that if we can show something to somebody while we're talking about it, it actually has a bigger effect on their learning than if we just talk about it or if we just show it. So let's let's talk a little bit about how some of the implications of this for presentations. So I often go to conferences, and when I go to conferences, I see a lot of PowerPoint presentations. And dual coding helps us understand why it's a bad idea to give a talk when your PowerPoint slides have a lot of text on them. Because if you do, the logogens channel of the people in the audience, they become overloaded because there are two sources of textual information they have to process. They have to process both the text that's on the screen and the text that we're speaking. And they can't do both of those things at the same time. If the learners try to read the text on the slides, then they have to temporarily block out what the speaker is saying. And if they try to focus on what the speaker is saying, they can't read the text on the screen. So this is why the best PowerPoint presentations usually combine an image on the screen and maybe just a tiny bit of text with the speaker's narration. And if you can combine language with images, that fosters better learning and a greater retention of the new knowledge. And it's also easier on working memory if you do that. Let's do a little experiment. What I want to do is I want to show you, oh yes, a web page. I'm gonna put the link in it in the channel, but I want to show you some different combinations of narration, text, and visuals. And I want you to think about which one works best. Okay, so this is what this web page looks like. And if you scroll down, you see it's got these 5 different presentations. And I'm going to look at the first, the third, and the fifth. Now, they're all the same presentation. And they're not the same presentation. They're the audio portion, the narrated portion is exactly the same in all 5 of these. The audio track is identical, but the visuals are different. So I'm going to show you the first, the third, and the fifth. And as you look at each one, think about what you like and what you don't like about it. So here's the first one.
Our organisation is committed to reducing our environmental footprint and responding to global sustainability issues. So, we make sustainable practices part of the way we work. There are some simple things everyone can do to help. Switch off unnecessary lights and equipment. Choose carbon-neutral travel options. Meet up online if you can. Recycle and compost whenever possible. Do as much as you can online and only print if you really need to. We expect all our staff to follow these guidelines when they work at our site or if they're working remotely. Working sustainably makes a positive difference to our world and supports long-term business success.
Okay, so that's the single image with verbatim text. It's like somebody reading their slides, essentially. Here's another version. This version is progressive appearance with summarized text.
Our organisation is committed to reducing our environmental footprint and responding to global sustainability issues. So, we make sustainable practices part of the way we work. There are some simple things everyone can do to help. Switch off unnecessary lights and equipment. Choose carbon-neutral travel options. Meet up online if you can. Recycle and compost whenever possible. Do as much as you can online and only print if you really need to. We expect all our staff to follow these guidelines when they work at our site or if they're working remotely. Working sustainably makes a positive difference to our world and supports long-term business success.
Okay, and then here's the last one. This is fully animated with no text.
Our organisation is committed to reducing our environmental footprint and responding to global sustainability issues. So, we make sustainable practices part of the way we work. There are some simple things everyone can do to help. Switch off unnecessary lights and equipment. Choose carbon-neutral travel options. Meet up online if you can. Recycle and compost whenever possible. Do as much as you can online and only print if you really need to. We expect all our staff to follow these guidelines when they work at our site or if they're working remotely. Working sustainably makes a positive difference to our world and supports long-term business success.
Okay, so those are the the three videos. First one again was a lot of text with a single image. Second one was progressive appearance with some summarized text, and then the last one was fully animated. They have different advantages and disadvantages, but I'm kind of interested in what you guys thought of them. Let's have a little poll and see what you guys think. Okay, I'm going to end the poll, and let's share the results. Okay, so most people like the fully animated with no text. We had a one vote for a single image with verbatim text, and we had kind of a close second was progressive appearance with summarized text.
Mhm.
So this is kind of a cool demonstration because, again, it's the same presentation 3 times with the same audio track, but they changed the imagery, and they have different appeals, different advantages to each one. So the results largely that we've got here largely align with dual coding theory. If you have 2 long streams of text at once, both of them text-based, it's sometimes difficult. And you can see that by kind of the low number of people that like the single image with the verbatim text. Now, the first example can be useful in some cases. If people, for example, are second language learners and have difficulty processing verbal texts, then it is often helpful to have it written out so they can follow along, and having the advantage of the two together can be useful for them. So, I mean, the answer to which one of these is best depends. So research suggests that in general, it's better to complement narration with images, but in some cases, it's good to have some words or a lot of words even to provide support. But in general, we're capitalizing more on dual coding if we complement the visual with the audio. Now, I don't know about so one of the other issues is whether the images should be images, single images, or animations. That's another kind of issue that you have to decide on as a speaker. Animations are often useful for especially if you want to teach the students a particular process or show how things evolve. If you have too many animations, they can be a bit of a distraction. In terms of text, again, the general recommendation from dual coding theory is to minimize the text. But again, a lot depends on the situation. I don't know about you, but if I'm watching a movie where the characters on the screen have a heavy Scottish accent, I'm going to turn on the subtitles because that helps me process it. And I do that because my LogoGens channel is not adequately capturing everything that's being said. In that case, subtitles can help them figure it out. So if you're dealing with an audience that has a lot of second language learners, that can be useful. Progressive appearance with just having little summaries of text, that can also be helpful because the summarized text can capture the main idea and emphasize it. So, so either of those. Nidhi has a comment.
Yeah, I was just saying that I personally found the moving earth with clouds on it in the second version really distracting, although I actually quite like the second one, but I also do like the third one. If I were to do it, I would probably redo the second one with having the keywords because that does really help. Because some of these words may have cultural connotation also, like looking at a recycling bin, not knowing what really that is. Like if you asked me when I was in India, I wouldn't really know what that is, for example. So I was just sharing that there is a potential scope to combine in a decent way the third option that you showed and the second option, and then do something with it and align a little bit more, bring in more dual coding theory. That was just a thought. I was thinking, how would I do it if I were to do it? That's the question I often ask myself. Thanks, Jim.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. And the first one could be better to let people read the text first and talk about key insights. Yes, that could be another process. Sometimes when you've got a quote on the screen, that's, I guess, one thing you can do is just have people read the quote rather than read the quote out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah, Paul makes a really good point. If the text doesn't match, then you've got a problem because then again you got to shut off what the person's saying in order to read it.
Yeah.
So it makes it more difficult. Anyway, so this gives you kind of a sense of dual coding. Again, it's this complementary nature of images and text, but you have to be careful not to overload, as Paul's saying here, the text channel, the LogoGens channel. That's really easy to do if you're not careful.
This representation, this example that you showed us, Jim, it's not as straightforward, to create presentations. And so you have to think about your audience, you have to think about their prior knowledge, you have to think about their language barriers, cultural barriers. So all this is to say is that dual coding theory may not by itself solve the problem of, just making sure that we're doing the thing the way we're supposed to do. But that is one of the tracks or the guiding principles to take along as we design content, as we design instruction, while also keeping in mind everything else that we also do. And this is why I think Richard Mayer has done some real tremendous work by aligning a lot of the work that dual coding theory has provided us. So we actually have a list of multimedia design principles that largely have been derived from dual coding theory, but also in combination with cognitive load theory and cognitive theory of multimedia learning. So those are the three theories that Richard Mayer has worked with and developed, and these are tried, tested, experimented principles. And they really turn into a more of a tangible, and you can play around with these principles based on your needs. So as I mentioned, dual coding is very important because the theory has produced, I think right now there are about 14, but there's some more as well for the creation of effective multimedia. And I always find this fascinating because we've known Alan Pavio, who came up with dual coding theory, who developed dual coding theory, I should say. in, I think, late 1960s. So it's not something new for us. We've known this for a while. There's a lot of evidence on this. And now we have these principles that actually translate what that means in our really heavily technology-driven world in which we live, learn, teach, and things like that, right? So each one of the principles that you see on the screen right now are, as I said, experimentally tested and verified. Collectively, they provide a terrific set of guidelines that you can use for delivering, developing, and delivering effective multimedia. And there are a lot of them here, but anyway, we'll take a look at some of them. So obviously, I think you see about 14 on the screen, things like multimedia principle, spatial contiguity principle, temporal contiguity principle, redundancy principle, etc. So I'll walk you through some of the more common ones, and you'll start noticing that you've seen that before, actually. Maybe you just didn't know the name, or maybe you did, but we'll have a look. So you see here the multimedia principle, right? The multimedia principle, in the main idea, this is the main one, original one as well, is multimedia principle out of the dual coding theory. And again, it's pretty simple. It basically says you should mix words and associated images wherever possible. So on the screen, the left side has got a mix, while the right side is just text. The left side is better. Wherever it's practical to do so, again, understanding your learners, knowing their limitations, if they have limitations of a variety of reasons, so understanding that. But whenever it's practical to do, use a combination of visual and verbal elements when developing multimedia. Why? So we don't overload the working memory, so we balance the language and images channels, so we are having that, what Jim said earlier, that additive effect of learning, because it increases it much more than you having to listen to your speaker while also trying to read what's on the screen. If second side of the screen, right side of the screen would be the screen that someone ended up using. Okay, let's look at the spatial contiguity principle. This principle says people learn better when text and corresponding graphics are placed close to one another. So on this screen, the left side has got an image beside the related text, while the right side, they're far apart. The left side is better, and even better example is this one. So you can see here, so you can see how in this particular visual, this can really help to align the design with spatial contiguity principle. And we actually encountered this, I think, when we were probably talking about dual coding theory, cognitive load theory as well. And this is one of the ways to reduce cognitive load, is to not separate labels from things that they're referring to, because it's a lot harder to read what's on the right side. It's like, okay, I'm looking at number 4, and then I have to look at the list, and my working memory is really distributed. Okay, let's move on to the modality principle. The modality principle is an interesting one, and it says that humans, particularly novices, learn better from visuals and spoken text than from visuals accompanied by printed words. So what that means is that you have the visual, but the narration is actually what's facilitating the additional learning versus the visual and the text. And this works really well for novices, because what you want when you're teaching in a class, for example, what you want when your new learners, when learners are learning new knowledge that they don't yet possess, then you really want them to be able to focus on what you're saying versus being completely distracted with what's on the screen. So that's the modality principle. Works more important for novices. I think there is a bit of a catch in there. It says the extension of this is that, but if there are very, very, very many complex terms in your audio or in your narration, then those terms you may want to have on the screen. So again, it's not black or white. There's some shades of gray in there, so you have to align. Again, you have to understand what the content is, what your learner is, but having these principles do give you an understanding and a way to think as you're developing multimedia content. The next one is the personalization principle. Humans learn better from a more informal, conversational voice than a formal, direct voice. Try to write and speak in short, informal sentences. How would you explain it? Simple ways. And this has, I think, implications on a lot of the AI-generated videos that we're getting. So if you watch them, I mean, once in a while I use them too, but my preference is almost always if I can use my own voice. And I think there's the voice principle there too, and personalization principle, they combine there, because the AI-generated voice can seem, I mean, some of the tools, some of the platforms are really doing an amazing job lately, but I still prefer, with a bit of pauses, bit errors, and bit uhs, because it's just more natural for us to be able to process that information. And then we have the coherence principle. The coherence principle says humans learn better when extraneous, distracting content is not included in the learning material. So basically, the coherence principle is saying, get rid of the extraneous cognitive load. Something that's not serving the owl, for example, or the bulb, just get rid of it. Just because we want to make something aesthetically pleasing, but we end up putting all these extra things in there, and they're not serving the direct learning, then there's no point having them. So that's about half of them, but you get the idea. We're happy to share where you can find more information about all these 14 plus principles. But just to give you an idea, that's should help. And these are all sort of derived from cognitive load theory, dual coding theory, and cognitive theory of multimedia learning. Thanks to Richard Mayer for that. Okay, so again, altogether, they're established 14. Well, I think recently it might have been 15. And if you follow, and if you follow these principles, you can create very good presentations that take advantage of how humans process visuals, text, and narration together, right? I make lots of videos for like micro lessons and micro learning videos, and these are the kind of things that I think on a regular basis. Do I make mistakes? Yes, and I continue to learn from them. And again, these are principles. They provide you the guiding sort of line of how to think about it. And you know, you just continue working through that process. Okay, Jim, over to you. And I do notice, I think Paul might be here. But we can continue just with a few more slides, and then we'll continue our awesome conversation with Paul. I only saw the name, I haven't seen the visuals. So anyway, Jim, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, yeah. So sometimes, you know, when Nidhi and I talk to our students about this, they ask us about learning styles, because when they talk about people being a visual learner or an auditory learner, they wonder, well, you know, how does that relate to learning styles theory? And it turns out, you know, Nidhi and I have been kind of reviewing some of the research on this, that there really isn't any evidence for learning styles. There's no evidence that, you know, that there are such things as that people who consider themselves to be visual learners learn more than auditory learners if you teach both groups using visual instruction. And there's a wonderful video on this topic. It's called The Biggest Myth in Education. We thought we'd just play a small part of that video for you that talks about some of the evidence that they've gathered around this. Tell me if you can hear it or not, though, because maybe it's just YouTube. I don't know.
I like creating a story because it's easier to remember a story than just individual objects. So I try to like tie it all into one story.
This is obviously anecdotal evidence, but rigorous studies like the one I outlined have been conducted. For example, one looked at visualizers versus verbalizers instead of visual versus auditory learners. The study was computer-based. So first, students' learning styles were assessed using questions like, would you rather read a paragraph or see a diagram describing an atom? The researchers also provided some challenging explanations with 2 buttons, visual help or verbal help. The visual one played a short animation, whereas the verbal help gave a written explanation. From these measures combined, the researchers categorized the students as either visualizers or verbalizers, and then the students were randomly assigned to go through a text-based or picture-based lesson on electronics. When a student hovered their mouse over keywords in the lesson, in the text-based group, a definition and clarification came up, but in the picture group, an annotated diagram was shown instead. And after the lesson, the students did a test to assess their learning. The students whose preferred learning style matched their instruction performed no better on the tests than those whose instruction was mismatched. The researchers ran the test again with 61 non-college educated adults and found exactly the same result.
But learning styles are a preference. So how strongly do learners stick to their preference? Well, in a 2018 study, during the first week of semester, over 400 students at a university in Indiana completed the VARC questionnaire, and they were classified according to their learning style. Then at the end of the semester, the same students completed a study strategy questionnaire. So how do they actually study during the term? Well, an overwhelming majority of students used study strategies which were supposedly incompatible with their learning style, and the minority of students who did did not perform significantly differently on the assessments in the course. The visual, auditory, reading, writing, kinesthetic, or VARK model came about from Neil Fleming, a school inspector in New Zealand. Describing the origins of VARK, he says, "I was puzzled when I observed excellent teachers who did not reach some learners and poor teachers who did. I decided to try to solve this puzzle. There are, of course, many reasons for what I observed, but one topic that seemed to hold some magic, some explanatory power, was preferred modes of learning, modal preferences. And thus, VARK was born. There was no study that revealed students naturally cluster into 4 distinct groups, just some magic that might explain why some teachers can reach students while others can't. But how can this be? If we accept that some people are more skilled at interpreting and remembering certain kinds of stimuli than others, like visual or auditory, then why don't we see differences in learning or recall with different presentations? Well, it's because what we actually want people to recall is not the precise nature of the images or the pitch or quality of the sound, it's the meaning behind the presentations. There are some tasks that obviously require the use of a particular modality. Learning about music, for example, should have an auditory component. Similarly, learning about geography will involve looking at maps. And some people will have greater aptitude to learn one task over another. Someone with perfect pitch, for example, will be better able to recall certain tones in music. Someone with excellent visuospatial reasoning will be better at learning the locations of countries on a map. But the claim of learning style theories is that these preferences will be consistent across learning domains. The person with perfect pitch should learn everything better auditorily. But that is clearly not the case. Most people will learn geography better with a map.
So that's the big problem we've got. There's an awful lot of research out there that's actually tried to identify benefits of learning styles, but they fail to do so. So but nevertheless, learning styles does seem to have a lot of cachet in our kind of educational establishment.
So researchers have now known that for almost 2 decades that learning styles is not backed by evidence. This that screen that you see on this slide that you see on your screen, this is back in 2006, a group of educational researchers offered a $5,000 reward for anyone who could prove that teaching using learning styles produces better learning outcomes. To the best of our knowledge, no one has yet collected the reward. And this is not just the only space or place where it happens in classrooms, or we may have beliefs of that. And we've believed in this popular idea, but it continues to proliferate. So in fact, Ontario government today promotes also the teaching of learning styles. And what you see on the screen is this particular document that we have from the Government of Ontario Ministry of Education is called Learning for All. I believe this might be from 2015, and that's the latest one, though it hasn't been updated since then, again, to the best of my knowledge. This is a government document developed for teachers. There's other documents too, but I'm just showing you this as an example. So this says Learning for All, a guide to effective assessment instruction for all students, kindergarten to grade 12. So I'm going to show you a bit of an insight of this document. So this is what it looks like from outside. If you just Google it, you'll find a PDF version of it. And this is one of the pages on it. So, and if you just did like a Control F or a Command F on it, it refers to the notion of learning styles, I think with an S, in 29 different places. And if you had it with a non-plural version, then it probably is even more. It recommends that teachers assign different tasks to students based on their learning styles. You probably can't read the small text here, but this government document also recommends that teachers should teach according to their multiple intelligences profile. There has never been any evidence produced that teaching students according to their multiple intelligences and learning styles profile has any value, right? But it's there in the document that's supposed to be a guiding document for educators in the province of Ontario, right? So here's a bit of a summary of the problems that we have with learning styles. First of all, there is no evidence for them, right? Second is learning styles are extremely time consuming for the instructor. To implement learning styles, a teacher first has to determine the learning style of each student. Once that's done, the teacher has to design multiple forms of instruction for each lesson so that each student can be taught according to that particular learning style. And this consumes a tremendous amount of time and energy. You see the issue, right? The third thing is when learning styles are promoted institutionally, let's say at the school or a board level, It can produce feelings of guilt among teachers who find learning styles to be too much work to implement. Things like, I'm such a bad teacher, or I don't value the learning styles of my students and I'm not doing my job properly. And these feelings are unwarranted and unnecessary while the time could be spent on the job that they probably do already really well. The fourth thing is using learning styles works against equity issues, equity initiatives also. So it's a bigger problem than just saying it's a myth, it's all good, we should not follow it. But then for those who are following it, they are creating a scenario, or the scenario is being created that actually goes against the equity initiatives. The time that a teacher spends teaching to a student's preferred learning style could be more profitably invested in helping students succeed, particularly students who are struggling. Some of the more productive evidence-backed uses of teacher time include diagnosing and filling gaps in students' prior knowledge, giving effective feedback, designing retrieval practice activities, spending one-on-one time tutoring individual learners who require additional help, and so forth. And all these that I mentioned right now have a lot of evidence supporting them. So when you think about all this, it's a bit mind-blowing. Someone comes up with the idea of learning styles, and it just gets adopted all around the world without any kind of evidence or critical analysis or any study that's ever conducted to make sure to prove that it actually exists. It doesn't exist, so it's kind of almost hard to prove a negative, right? Like, how do you prove something that doesn't exist? So but it keeps proliferating. It's a very popular and a detrimental myth, I would say. So why do you think this happened? And this is an important question, right? I think learning styles shows us that sometimes, and maybe even a lot of the time, the things that teachers are told to do may not be based on scientific research. They're not based on evidence. They're based on people's personally held beliefs about education. You read that, you saw that video clip where it was saying, I felt the magic, the power. It's just this personal belief that they were doing it this way and hence it must be. One theory that some research suggests is that the idea of learning style has gained a lot of traction because it appeals to people who strongly believe that we're all individuals and we all learn in slightly different ways. And this is a romantic, and it makes sense too. And I've heard Paul talk about that also. It's like, it makes sense to think like that, but it's not that. Learning works differently. Learning styles fits nicely, I think, with that belief. And people almost want to think it's true. I am my individual self, right? But it creates a lot of tension, a lot of detriment in how learning actually happens. But the reality is that humans were designed to learn by encoding visuals and sounds together. So I almost feel, and I often say to Jim as well, maybe dual, if we continue talking more about dual coding theory, maybe there's hope, but well, there's still things that come around for learning styles. So there's that. Any thoughts and comments? And I'm going to stop sharing my screen because there are no more slides because we have Paul in the room. And I think Paul probably has a lot to say about this. And there's 17 chat messages that I haven't read. All right.
Hi, everyone. Very nice. I really enjoyed it. Very, very good. Yeah,
Thank you.
My compliments. Yeah. But yeah, I don't have very much to say. It's more of, I mean, I agree. One of the major, one of the, you discussed about learning styles, and that if you ever do try to implement it, it would take more time. You have to realize that you spoke, I mean, I came in when you were talking about VAR and FARC, yeah, that's only 3 or 4 learning styles. But Paschler and others, I think, came up with 82 different ones. And you might be, if you believe in learning styles, you might be a visual atomistic learner, or you might be a visual holistic learner. You could also be an auditory atomistic learner or an auditory visual. So now you have 4 times 2. So now you have 8 different versions of what you have to do. And if you are then also a visual atomistic field dependent learning, you might say someone else who is a visual atomistic field independent. So now we have 4 times 2 times 2, which is 16 different versions of exactly the same instruction. Now, if they were only 2 to the 82nd power is more than the number of people who have ever existed on this earth. So it's also completely absurd. You would be, the question of why would you choose one learning style above another if they actually existed? The other thing is, I forget who it was. It was somebody's razor. It's not Occam's razor. Oh, I have to think of it. But that's it's those who present extraordinary claims require that they give extraordinary evidence. And the problem is that people, designers, scientists, are often asked to dispute something like learning styles, where I say, it's not my job to dispute that they exist. You need to prove to me that they exist. Yeah, and it's somebody's RAZER or RAZOR. It's one of my favorites, and I'm at a loss at this moment to figure out which one it is. But it's kind of like, it's the burden of proof is not on you to show that it doesn't exist. The burden of proof is on the person who claims that it does exist. Yeah, those making extraordinary claims need to come with extraordinary evidence of it. And so I've stopped disputing it. I said, now prove it to me that it does exist. It's just like trying to prove how many angels you can fit on the head of a pin, or whether or not God exists. Great if you think of it, but prove to me that God does exist. It's not my job to prove to you that it doesn't, that he doesn't, or she doesn't, or it doesn't. Okay, that's my preaching for today.
Thank you. Thank you. Laura mentioned something, and I wanted to take a moment to talk about that. And I think that's an important thing, is that with this notion of learning styles, I think there's a lot of emotions attached as well, in the sense that when we, like, for example, Jim, myself, and Paul here, and many people probably already knew that learning styles has not been supported by any evidence. But for those who don't know, it may come across as an initial, it's like, whoa, what are you talking about? Because I believed this for many, many years of my teaching practice. And that has a bit of an emotional component. So I always try to come from the place of kindness, saying that, when I was a really new teacher, when I started teaching back in 2002 in India, and I started my teaching career teaching German, for a bit, I probably also believed in it. I just had the privilege to be able to hand it over some amazing literature, one of that being How Learning Happens. And since then, the journey is continuing for me. I've had that privilege, but I think saying that with that place of kindness and understanding that I've made that mistake too, but that doesn't mean that I need to continue. And then everything else that Paul's saying on top of it is like, proving something that doesn't exist is not necessarily what we need to do, but can we see any evidence? And I think that applies for all the pedagogical practices that are promoted left, right, and center from people, school boards, and things. So
another problem for teachers is that both parents and students then can easily put the blame on you. My child didn't learn because she is a visual learner and you're primarily verbal in class. So it's kind of like, on the one hand, a pigeonhole, and on the other hand, it's kind of like a cop-out. And it gives both the learner and the parent a way out. Whereas Gaby Solomon in, oh God, I think it was 78, but it could have been later, did research. And he, at that moment, just proved incredibly, it was about reading or watching video, and proved that he called it was about tough media versus easy media. If you want to look it up, I don't remember the exact year, but it's about tough, and it's been replicated a number of times. But what people actually are saying when they say they have a learning style, they, number one, have a preference, and number two, it's usually the preference is usually that which they have to expend the least amount of effort. The calculating student, the calculating consumer. So it's it feels easier to lean back. You get the idea that Gaby Solomon showed to prove that really well, that you think that you've learned more, but when you check afterwards, you've learned less. So it's a problem with the judgment of learning. which people can't usually do very well. The idea that something that seems easy is probably better. All of those things play into this learning style quagmire.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bit of a connection there to I mean, we've been having this discussion in the chat about UDL and kind of, you know, giving students multiple means of expression. And there's kind of a connection there to, well, you know, students may just kind of choose whatever mode of expression is easiest for them.
Of course. I mean, UDL, if you would design a UDL system in which, of a prescriptive way, one of the people said, what if someone is deaf, then you can, then there are subtitles there, you know, it can be used for good, but it's often used for, okay, it's going a little bit dramatic, evil in that respect. I often, when I'm giving a lecture to a large room, I'll ask people from in the room to please tell me what you prefer to eat. And if I tally it up, it's usually things that are either sweet or salty or fatty, with what is it? Haagen-Dazs caramel sea salt ice cream being, you know, like the ultimate in food. But I say, now, if you were a dietitian or a doctor, a GP, would you prescribe that for a person, that which they prefer to eat? And they look at me and say, no. And I say, well, why would you do that to someone who said that she or he preferred to learn in this way? That person doesn't know what's best. What's preferred is often not what's best for someone. And I try to get people to think about it in that way. I often find it easier to get them thinking in the what I would call the proper way, by using those types of analogies instead of trying to combat it with science. Because then you always meet up with, yeah, but my sister or my daughter, and I often say, if you have a second anecdote, we'll call it data, and we can analyze it.
Mhm.
That's my cynical, sarcastic side.
Matthias says something really interesting and reminded me of this idea that believing in them can, and then I think it aligns with Pearl's comment as well about her daughter, just making one believe in these learning styles, like also promoting these kind of mindsets. And then from a very young age, you just believe, oh, because I'm a visual learner, so maybe I probably can never learn to play the violin or the piano, or because I'm so-and-so. And then the Vark is only 4, as Paul said. There's so many more that the multiplication would not even be possible for us to do. If we start believing in those, then automatic is like, oh, I can't do this because I am a visual learner and math's not for me because it wasn't, you know, the way you're teaching it. And then I shut doors. And I think there was a study, and Jim, you might have prompted me to that, and I can't remember which one it was, but it was a longitudinal study where they looked at the beliefs that would develop when they're younger and how that truly impacted their future professional lives of these children, because they believed in something and their long-term academic performance and academic skills were really damaged or hampered by this belief. So that's the other piece. Like, it's really promoting into the fixed mindset as well. And Matthias's comment is really right up there.
Now,
I don't know, Matthias.
it goes even further, because you can see it as something like a nocebo effect. If you think that something doesn't work, it won't work. Yeah, and it's not a placebo, because if you think your learning style is the way you'll learn better, whatever you do, you won't learn better from it. But the other, receiving your instruction in another mode, you'll then say, well, it doesn't fit my learning style, so I can't learn from it. So you don't learn from it. So it's more a nocebo effect than a placebo effect.
That's right.
Hey,
yeah.
are you going to something? You have beautiful henna on your hands.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm a visual learner. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
It was Eid a few days ago, and the celebration continues. So my daughter really wanted it. So here it is.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
only just one side, so
Okay,
I
oh
just
yeah.
got this done. And the person who did it in 5 minutes.
I know. My daughter-in-law comes from Pune, and we were there for the wedding, and all of my daughters and she were incredibly, painted, tattooed with henna. And if you see this, how fast
Yes.
the women who can do that can do a whole arm. It's
Yeah.
just incredible.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's an aside.
Yes, yes.
But I
No, but
saw
it's
it,
so
and it was
true.
kind of like, oh yeah, I know that.
Yes, it's beautiful. It looks so
Yeah.
lovely. And anyway, it's kind of going away now because it was a few days ago. And
Yeah.
in between, I've washed very many dishes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
While trying to debunk, not trying to debunk the theory, but promote the idea that the theory of learning styles doesn't exist. Doing the
Right.
good work and making food. Yeah, no, this is really, really great. I'll open the floor to any other questions. I know we've
Yeah.
talked about learning styles, but folks have any other questions about what we talked today? Today we were looking at dual coding theory as an answer potentially to not looking at the learning styles piece,
Now,
but
if you
really
want to, if
looking
you
at
want to see a
evidence.
perfect example, I put it in. Go to the video in which the presenter about learning styles is talking about that inspector in New Zealand. And while he was telling exactly what that New Zealand inspector was saying, you could also read the text of what he was saying. Now, it was a perfect example of the redundancy principle and how it is bad for learning and what it should not be. Presenting what you're saying both verbally and in words on the screen. And I just was looking at that, and although it was about learning styles and not about dual coding, but that was a perfect example of how dual coding, the way some people do it, doesn't work because it was purely redundant. Yeah, that's one of the 14 principles, the redundancy principle by Rich, which actually is the redundancy principle of John Sweller.
Yeah, we talked about dual coding earlier in the session, and
Yeah, I saw it.
And I've become very sensitive to the fact when I'm making a presentation, am I violating the dual coding? Am I violating the principles while I'm making the presentation?
Exactly. But if you look at that video, at the point that he's talking about how they got Vark, yeah, at that point he's reading exactly what the inspector said, and you're also seeing it on the screen. So it's not like a subtitle which paraphrases what you're talking about, but it was the exact same thing. And I thought, I'm really glad it was a video about learning styles and not about dual coding and the redundancy effect.
Right. Yeah, we could highlight that because we always teach dual coding, and we always talk about dual coding together with learning styles. They make a nice combination.
Now, if you use that, you could stop it there and say, no, we just talked about the redundancy principle and dual coding. Look at what he's doing on this video.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember one day when I was doing a presentation and I talked about the cognitive load theory, and the content was a lot, so I paused and I had a slide with summary points at the end. And I actually stopped speaking at that point, and I said I just want the audience to just read. And this was in person presentation, just happened last year. And I said, when you're done, just give me a thumbs up, just I can read the room in that moment. And it feels awkward. As a speaker, I understand to stop talking, but it's the right thing to do if you want people to understand what you're actually trying to say. So my slide,
it's perfect. You're completely correct. But it also trains the students. Also, then they listen to you, and then you give them a moment in which you have the bullets there, and they can read them themselves and maybe make notes about it, so that while you're talking, they can concentrate on what you're doing and don't have to do it. So on one, you're not violating the redundancy principle, and on the other hand, you're giving them the chance of, after they've heard you, to make use of that slide with the text as like a memory help.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So thank you for, and it worked well because it was a bit of a surprise to the people that, I'm standing there, I'm just going to be quiet for the next 30-40 seconds, but it's the right thing to do, and getting past that phase of awkwardness is important if we want to apply evidence in how we do things and modeling, because I couldn't be talking about cognitive load theory and like overloading my own
Exactly.
audience. So
Exactly.
yeah. Any other questions? I know
Any
the chat's
questions
quite
there?
hot in there.
Turn on your microphone if you want to ask a question, and ask. I'm very low, low level of what's called, we call it drempel, so low threshold. No. Okay, then I'm going to go and make a quiche for dinner.
Sounds
Do we get
delicious.
a part of it, the quiche?
If you hop on a plane and come over.
That's gonna have to happen now.
Okay. But
Thank you, Paul.
are there any other questions either in the chat or of someone? Please don't feel shy. If you have anything to ask, please ask. Matthias,
Oh, I
did
think
you
Matthias has a
something?
question. Go ahead, Matthias.
Yeah, hi. I don't have a question, but just to give thanks to Paul and you all. This is a great opportunity to learn more. And I have your book translated.
Oh, mitos
translated here.
hermanos.
Yeah,
Sí.
yeah, urban myths.
Yeah.
We translated it in Aptus, so and I edited it. So I love it. I love this book.
Thank you very
so
much.
It's really great to see you and talk with you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Matthias. And Matthias will be in Toronto as well. So for folks who are going to be attending the Research Ed conference, so Matthias is coming all the way from Chile to share, actually share something very relevant to what we talked about today, applying cognitive load theory and showing examples, tangible examples by means of his own presentation, how we should be doing it. So Matthias, probably Jim and I had some errors in there, so I can't wait to, I'm gonna have to make sure that you and I are not presenting at the same time so I can attend your session, but it's exciting. Oh, Desiree has a question, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Paul, thank you for coming back. And Nidhi, James, I love your workshops. I learned so much. I'm a teacher, and a lot of our school documents, even a course I just did for special ed, talked about universal design for learning. We talked about learning styles. How do we, as a system, sort of recognize that this could be a myth or is a myth?
Yeah, that's the.
Or-
I mean, as I said, I often try to make it salient by making use of analogies in that, because I often find that coming up with the literature says or the research says, you know, it kind of like kills the conversation at that point in time. But I would say to any school supervisor or someone who's saying it to me, say, would you go to a doctor who makes use of therapies that hundreds of medical articles have shown to be pure BS? And they'd probably say no. And you can give them examples like auras or laying of hands or things like that. I said, yet you do approve of teaching children according to an intervention, a way of teaching them, that has been debunked in hundreds of scientific articles. You have no problem there. Please explain to me why in the first case you wouldn't do it, and in the second case you're doing it. So I understand the problem. I really do, Desiree. And it's something I come against often. But I then think it's up to me to be, how do I say it? The Dutch word is vindingrijk, to be creative in finding a way to make it very salient to them what they're actually doing. I mean, I can try to tell them, no, it's not, and our brains work this way and that way and the other way. Or I can say, this is a piece of research on it, but I would then do it the other way and say, well, if you wouldn't go to a doctor who makes use of therapies in which the whole medical community knows that it doesn't work, why are you making use of a pedagogical technique that the whole scientific community knows and has proven doesn't exist? And then try to see what the answer to that is. And if it's because my daughter, then I go into, yeah, but an anecdote, great, yeah. my grandmother's sister's uncle, that's not proof. So, I mean, that's what I would, Desiree, that's what I would recommend you to do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's great. I'm writing it down. Thank
My
you.
pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah, but it's such a challenge, right? Like all the official documents are telling you to do something, and then you go through these PDs, and then you would attend this PD, and we say, so I often say Jim and I, and then now Paul's here, which is awesome. We're like these balloon burster, like myth burster disruptors almost, and in certain ways, it's scary to be able to say those things, but we're saying the right things, so we have to always stick to, it can be an uphill battle, Desiree. I feel you.
If you're at a PD and they come with learning styles, the first thing you might want to say is, based upon what research?
Yeah.
And if that person then is standing there with a wide open mouth and can't give you 3 or 4 or 5 references on which that idea is based, you say, okay, so actually it's based on nothing. Oh no, there's been research. Which research? You're now propagating it. Which research? Please tell me. You're the expert giving this PD. If you can't tell me that, why should I do it?
Yeah.
So confront the person. Doesn't have to be as confrontational as I do it. Yeah. But confront that person and ask them based upon what?
Yeah. I was just about to say, doing it with kindness and genuine curiosity is that, so, if somebody was talking about ritual practice, Jim and I talked about ritual practice last week, and we presented study after study after study after study after study, and then lots of great questions, and there was more studies to support it. This is not the case with learning style. This is not the case with many pedagogical practices that are, pervasive. So just gently asking, can we please, and I think that teachers should do that. Can we please look at the research? Can we please be directed to the evidence? And I think that's a genuine, that's a right question to ask.
Can I jump in? What you're doing is showing that the emperor doesn't have any clothes.
Yeah.
Can
I
jump in? This morning, this was sent to me, Hewitt Illabelle's book.
Of course.
And I just started reading the beginning of it, and it says, research says is often, the forward is research is often underwhelming. How is effectiveness measured? So I'll say the other side is claiming its own research and dismissing kind of the research that we're talking about.
But if that's usually the case, usually it's the case, there are only 3 or 4 people with their names on all of those articles. What's his name? Manu Kapoor. If you look at his meta review of successful failure, you'll see that almost all of the articles that show that it works, he's one of the authors on. And it was the same thing with Carol Dweck. That's number one. A second red flag is if they're making any money on it. If their name is also part of a company doing it, like Carol Dweck. So if it's Carol did in the 70s and 80s really great work, but it's kind of come down to now being a commercial effort. And was it Carol or someone else? I have to think of who it was. Said there was a great article, and that was the best way to make sure that ... works is to have her on the research team. All other research doesn't show it. So I agree. You can always find a small group, but when we compare that to what Paschler found and the number of reference that he has in that book, and you compare it to the 3 or 4 that have usually worked together with each other, in which they are each other's co-authors, and often have a fiduciary stake on making use of it. Our setup is good for that. Our book is good for that. Our test of learning styles is good for that. And you can buy it for, then a gigantic red flag should start, we run up the flagpole in your head.
Yeah. I think in terms of thinking classrooms, that's what you had, Paul, is it thinking classrooms?
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think some of the research they refer to is like research that measures student engagement.
Yeah.
And so one of the problems is, yeah, they've got research there, but it's of engagement, and they use that as kind of a proxy for learning.
Perfect. Yeah.
But it's not.
But
Yeah.
it's not necessarily the same thing because
Jim,
kids
you're perfect. And
really,
I mean, Bob Coe, in when he did his inaugural address as a professor, gave a number of things what learning isn't, and one of them I called them poor proxies for learning. And one of the first named and poorest is engagement. If you're busy with something, it doesn't mean you're busy with it in the right way and learning from it. Yeah. So if it's that students think they learned better, self-report, they're more engaged, there's more conversation, there's more of this, all great. I have no problem with more engagement as long as one of the measures is more learning. If that's not there, then engagement, curiosity, or whatever doesn't mean anything to me. So it's important. Yeah, Jim hit the nail right on the head.
Yeah.
If they're claiming it, what are they claiming it? What are they claiming?
Daniel Willingham says it so nicely. What do you think the students are going to remember after, right? If they're going to remember all the fun they had and writing on the walls or making the volcano, whatever that might be, he says that memory is the residue of thought, then we did what we were trying to do, which was just give them fun, engagement, interaction. But if they don't remember the actual content, then the lesson's objectives not reached. That's
Yeah, there was. I wrote about it the problem with me is I'm now 72 and I've read too many things and can't remember enough of them. But there was the jelly. What was it? The jelly roll in mathematics. That was a mathematics teacher was discussing how you cut this many jelly rolls into this many for 7 people. And he came across a student a year or two later and asked that student about it. And it was great. It was the most fun lesson I ever had. But that person didn't remember anything about the content of the lesson. It was pure episodic memory and definitely not semantic memory. And I mean, it's great if the semantic memory is reinforced by the episodic. But if the only thing that's retained afterwards was the fun and how great it was to bake those jelly rolls and to cut them, but had no idea about the mathematics behind what you were doing as a teacher, then it was a fun lesson that was worthless.
yeah, what we really do need is like somebody to do a large scale kind of comparative study, with a control group on building thinking classrooms, just to get some answers. I could imagine there could be some benefits, minor benefits of students seeing a lot of different problems, perhaps over time. But I have a sister who teaches special ed, and she called me because not special ed, ESL. And she was really concerned about her ESL students because they were in these small groups in a classroom where they were doing, building thinking classrooms, and her kids weren't participating. They were being left out of these discussions.
Yeah.
My concern is that if there are benefits to BTC, then it may be the stronger kids that are benefiting and that, or reaping those benefits. On the other hand, maybe there are no benefits at all. We really need some studies to get to the end of this, in my opinion.
Yeah. By the way, it wasn't jelly rolls, but it was Swiss rolls. Yeah. I just now have to kind of, see if I can very quickly find who the writer was. who had it, but oh yeah, Craig Barton. In the book, Craig
Yeah.
Barton, How I Wish I Taught Maths. He talks about the Swiss roll problem. If you ever get a chance to go Google it and look up what the Swiss roll problem project was, then you know why engagement and fun is absolutely no measure of whether or not your teaching had any effect.
Yeah, Swiss roll problem. Yeah,
Swiss roll, yeah, Craig Barton.
Craig Barton. Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. The example was by Craig Barton. We
Yeah.
we had translated that book too. So
Thank you.
I have it in
Okay.
my in my
You
bookshelf.
should have been quicker.
Matthias, you're doing such great work. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, I'm looking at the time and I also hear my kids upstairs. But
Okay.
Paul, there were some private messages coming in that they can continue this, they can keep going on, they can keep listening to you and talking to you. So you make our, I have to say, already pretty good lessons or sessions even more awesome.
Sounded awesome
Little
when I
bragging
came
rights
in.
here.
It sounded awesome when I came in. It was really, really
thank
good.
you. That means
Yeah.
the world to me and to Jim as well. Thank you so much. But just I'm mindful of the time and it's Saturday here and a quiche needs to be put in the oven as well.
Quiche needs
So
to be produced. Yeah, so I'm gonna go and make my quiche.
okay, and
And
hopefully we'll see you next. So next session, by virtue of because LDA Ontario, ID of Ontario conference is the following. That's why we're doing our last session consequently, like we're simultaneously like right after the other. So we have our last session on April 20th and not the week after.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll see Paul as well and
I
some
have
more
no idea.
surprises.
It's in my if all went well, it's in my Outlook calendar.
It is in your calendar. I
And
made sure of it.
if I have time, yeah, and I'm not baking a quiche at that moment, I'll try to be back. If not, then until whenever, everybody.
No
Take
problem.
care
It's gonna
and keep up
happen.
the great work, Jim.
We
Nidhi.
are so grateful. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay,
everyone.
bye-bye.
Everybody have a great rest of your day. If you're in Toronto, Canada, you know, and if you're in Chile, hopefully the weather is better than here. It's raining, but thank you. It was a really great discussion today. So yeah, and we look forward to the recording. This was a bit of a hot session, MJ, but this is what we also need as we get to session 5. The people, their questions are changing, their thinking is evolving, and that's the transformation we want to see from a book study. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for all the great work.
Bye-bye.